So welcome everybody back to Adversity to Prosperity. I'm back with scale-up coach and business growth expert Neale Lewis for episode number 6. And I think in this episode, Neale, you alluded to the fact that you'd really like to dig into systems and processes and what we can be doing around that right now. After, of course, we had our brilliant roundtable discussion last week with some great entrepreneurs. So I'm still buzzing off the back of that. So thank you to everybody that's listened and for all the great feedback. It's been nice to know that we've been making a small difference out there. So welcome back, Neale.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I think it's really apt that we dig into systems and processes right now. I think it's one of the very first series of Adversity to Prosperity that we touched on the importance of spring cleaning as we go into this challenging time. And one of the things that you can get to work when you're spring cleaning is have a good feel for what systems are working right now, which processes maybe have become redundant, which areas of business are rocking, which bits are rolling. And so today we're just going to really go through why would you want to have system processes in place?
Okay,
what are the benefits? So actually, tell you what, I'm going to spin it around the other way and just ask you, in terms of your perspective this time, for you, what's the benefits of having a system in your business, in your estate agency business?
Okay, so for me, the benefits of having a system are you have uniformity with your processes and how your organization works. So if you have, for example, in the estate agency, we've got 8 locations. Unless you have a defined way of doing a certain thing, you'll find that everybody will do it their own way. And for me, you know, the meaning of a brand, it's not necessarily the colors or the logos. People always say Hannells has a strong brand. But where I see a brand is it's how you make your customers feel after they've dealt with you. And if you want to keep that consistent, then you need to have systems in place that people follow. Maybe they adapt and there's some flexibility in there and some autonomy to add their own bits and bobs in. But it also means that in terms of tracking and improving performance, if you don't have a system, you've got nothing to improve. So even if it's a bad system, at least you can find out where the kinks are and where things need ironing out. So then you can be constantly testing and tweaking and improving until you get to the point where you have a really solid, top performing system that you know you can roll out with confidence. Whether you've got 1 location or 1,000, as long as everybody who is following this system, you know that things are being done in the way that the business intended to be done. So I've probably gone on a bit longer than you wanted there. But is that, am I on the mark there with that? Is that how you would see it as well, Neale?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely nailed it. And it's interesting, we've got one of our landmark businesses just on the outskirts of Derby in Toyota, who coined the frame Kaizen, the Japanese term. Do you know what Kaizen means?
I know it's a lot around this lean to, or not lean to, the lean movement where, you know, you make everything as slick and efficient as possible, but I don't actually know what the interpretation of the word is. So I'm about to learn it.
It is. I think it goes something along the line of Kaizen is the way we'd understand it is continuous, never-ending improvement.
Okay, Kaizen.
Continuous,
I like
never-ending
that.
improvement. So it is very along the lines of, you know, some of the benefits that you recognized a few minutes ago. And, you know, let's just begin with that sort of either continuous, never-ending improvement, or probably more up to the now lean thinking. I think lean thinking now, or agile thinking, is becoming much more sort of in the vernacular. And probably more important than ever, that if we are to be more productive as we come out the other side of this crisis, if we are to be able to do ever more with ever less, then the importance of systems and great processes become even more important. There's one old sage who I think once said to me that to think about it this way: systemize the routine. So those routine tasks you're going to do time and time again, you've got systemized, and then humanize the exception. So if you're able to get machines to do all the things that, you know, can be done on a systemized basis and improves productivity, and then use the human side of things to build up amazing customer experience. So if you think about what, for me, for probably most of us, the way that we go to order a book nowadays, where would you go and order a book?
Amazon.
You go
as much as I hate to, as much as I want to support local independence, and there's another website I sometimes use called Wordery, but it doesn't always have the titles. I'm busy. I want the book. I know where it's going to be. I'm just going to go to Amazon.
Yeah, and you know, Amazon have just got the most amazing systems. Everything they must do has got to be underpinned by such powerful systems. From the way that as soon as you click that button, and they've made it easy for you to do that as well, to all the fulfillment processes and the ordering and everything else they have to do for that book to arrive at your doorstep within 12 hours sometimes. I think we can get an understanding around how that works. So one of the areas and one of the authors I reference a lot in my coaching is a guy called Paul Akers, and he's written a great book called 2 Second Lean. And there's a business not a million miles away from Derby in Alfreton called Climb Easy. And there's a practitioner up there called Ashley Bailey, who is a sort of a 2 Second Lean expert. And I had the good fortune to go and visit Ashley in his business probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and saw firsthand somebody who transformed their business from one by his own admission. I think it was back in 2012, he was at his wit's end. He was firefighting the whole time. The factory was a mess. They were letting the customers down the whole time. And I think it was at that time he was kind of introduced to Paul Akers, and then the light bulb came on that by being able to systemize his business and put his employee genius to work on always recognizing how do you go about constantly improving something across the business, that was going to have a transformative impact on his business. So, it's good that we've got someone, and we'll have a lot of business from Toyota at the large end of, but to who are absolutely global leaders around lean, to a mid-market company in Climb Easy who have really embraced a lot of this best practice, and I think they still do now. Probably you might shoot me for saying this, we'll have to catch up with him, but he does quite a lot of visits to the factory where people want to go and see best practice at work. So
I like that point that you mentioned to begin with, which is about sort of automating the stuff that can be done via technology and computers and systems. But those magic customer moments where you can really come into your own as a business, that's where you need great people to carry out those systems and processes.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think when you do an audit and think about right now, part of your own business, where are you duplicating things? Where are there errors being made? Where are the things that, again, fortunately, as humans, we make mistakes. That's just a way of the world. We make errors. We do things sometimes to drop the ball, which means that you've got to go and re-engineer something, or you've got to remanufacture, or you've got to go and duplicate and you let the side down. So it's recognizing, and we'll come on to in a minute some of the areas of business that can be systemized, and then have a think around that. But yeah, there are obviously huge benefits for figuring out right now how we can become more productive. As I said earlier on, doing ever more with ever less. Doing ever more with ever less is a great way of using that. Or put it another way, how do you get leverage into your business? Because by systems that are really working for you, you're able to deploy your people to areas where they can be more benefit.
Are you finding, Neale, with some of the clients that you're working with, that these are concepts that they've not really considered before, but they're now being forced to think about having ever more with ever less, and they are finding ways that they can improve and automate and make their systems and processes and their business as a whole more efficient? Yeah,
and I think I see it more certainly in manufacturing companies I coach, but nonetheless, it can be applied to anywhere, Ben. But one of the companies we took up to Climb Easy were a company called NCS Trade Science, who are based just off Ascot Road. And, they having gone up there, really got to work on implementing a lot of those 2 Second Lean improvements into their business. And I've seen huge strides in terms of the impact that's made. One of the areas that Ashley does, and for a while so did the NCS team, is every single day they have a daily huddle. And at that huddle, they spend 30 minutes coming together. And a lot of that time is looking at a particular process and what are the 2 second improvements that they may have made over the last 24 hours. And so maybe somebody will lead a process improvement, and they'll reflect back on that to the rest of the team. And it might be something as straightforward as moving, where some of the supplies are for that particular part of that manufacturing process, to just making the tools easier to get to, or whatever it is, or just moving a widget somewhere. But what then you aggregate up over the course of the year, that the improvements in terms of what the saving would be on time or in terms of parts around that is significant. So all they're doing the whole time is using their team members to recognize where they can make those improvements. and lovely culture, because then they're able to congratulate or thank their team for those improvements, benefit. Then they feel that they're valued, that their energy is valued. And of course, it's the people who are closest to the coalface who've got the best ideas about how things can be improved, or the ones who are bitchy, moaning the other way around if things aren't working quite right. So I think that was a lovely example of what we saw when we were able to take away. Other of my clients use initiatives like Route 66, again, just to as a way of being able to come up with constant improvements that get fed back to the CEO and the leadership team. Gene Brown and the City Bin Company I work with has got a great initiative called Bin It, and that was a theme for their business for a while. And I think it's something that actually everyone listening today can use just to dust down over the next 3 months or so. What are the processes right now that are redundant? What are the old systems that really no one's using anymore? What's the old spreadsheet that you were asked to do 2 years ago that no one's looking at anymore? So just finding a way in terms of binning out of date, ineffective processes that are going to save huge amount of time, energy, stress, and all those sort of things.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many spreadsheets and folders that are springing to people's mind as you've dropped that Bin It initiative in there, Neale. Now, just going back to that 2-second lean, what I presume that is all about is, as you've already mentioned, is just making tiny tweaks to certain processes and systems each day that over the long run, they amount to big changes and big savings and big efficiencies. Is that the sort of the core of the principle?
It is just that. And it starts off with, again, goes back to Kaizen and that sort of, some people use 5S in terms of thinking, 3S thinking, if you're already lean practitioners. But I think the sort of almost the 3S's that Climb Easy had were, one, they're fastidious, and so is Paul Akers, who wrote the book about clean, and so the Japanese. So the Japanese almost have a ritual that everybody from the CEO or the leadership team are involved in keeping the factory clean. It's not just, it's seen as a cultural thing that you take pride in everything, and it could be that CEOs there cleaning the floors out as much as it is the rest of the team. Then they go about improving, and then they go about discussing, and that's that sort of their 3-step, if I remember rightly, that they can do that. But it's a cultural thing as well, Ben. It has to come from the top, and it has to be something that is trained and integrated, and everyone feels a part of that. I think certainly that's the sort of 2-second lean methodology. We'll put a link to the FastCap and the 2-second lean website at the bottom of this podcast, so that everyone can go and have a look at. And what Paul has done so well is pretty much they use video to document all the improvements. So they use Kaizen foam, so that when at the end of the day, all the tools can be put away effectively, so it makes it easy to find out that. It's just little examples about photocopier, making sure that the photocopier is right next to where most of the people are doing printing off, and that the paper that need to fill the photocopies there, the ink is right next to it, so you're not wasting energy and time to go and have to just replenish the photocopier. That's kept clean so it doesn't break down. So they've got videos from the photocopier to maybe some other parts of their manufacturing that they've all got captured. And as you rightly say, once you've got that, then you can improve it. You can go about making those continuous little improvements that compound up to quite a big improvement.
Yeah, brilliant. Some great themes and methodologies to work by on that. And like you say, Neale, we'll have all of those shared in the show notes. Now, I think a lot of people hear about systems and processes, Neale, and it's easy to think, particularly with some of the examples that you've mentioned. When you talk about manufacturing in Toyota, you've got assembly lines, you've got robots and systems and processes that are happening. But where people perhaps don't realize, or what people perhaps don't understand, is this the systems and processes in every business, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a service-based business, whether you sell something over a website. Is that something that you find with new clients, is that perhaps they don't quite understand the extent to what systems and processes apply to their own businesses? And can you give us a couple of examples of, for example, a service-based business? What would a typical system or process look like for those guys?
Yeah. So, all of us, every single person of us, will be using systems and processes, whether they are documented and articulated or just up in our minds somewhere, because otherwise nothing would happen. So let's think about some of the typical process and that would be relevant for any business. Number one right now, to make sure that you get great talent coming into your business is having a good or a great recruitment process. And one of the things I often see is that people bemoan the fact that they often think they've hired a great candidate, great person to their organization, and they unfortunately turn out to be a dud. And how on earth did that happen? Their CV is amazing. They looked amazing on paper. They came across brilliant in the interview, and yet, when they actually got to work in real time, it was a dud. So, you can bring in really robust recruitment processes. We'll talk at this in a future session around top grading, and how you can put in a system to give more assurance that you are going to hire a great person. But again, that's such an important one right now. Obviously, any organization, but we touched on it last week or a couple of weeks ago, needs to be able to sell well, if they're going to grow. Of course, if you're going to sell well, you need a sales process. You need to document how that works through, how you take people through your sales pipeline or your sales funnel so that they come out the other end as ideally a client or a customer. By mapping that out and understanding the different elements of it, where are you successful, where do you lose a client, where do you miss out on a conversion at different those areas. Of course, you can map that, and that's critical. Before sales, probably you're going to be marketing and having a marketing process. We talked about that as well, didn't we? About making sure that right now you're dusting down some of your marketing, but making sure that you're efficient in getting leads coming into your business. And anything from, organizations that may be doing networking and having a process for networking, running seminars, every element of that has some sort of process that you can map down to make sure that it works more effectively. So that's it. If you're in a manufacturing area, obviously you're going to have production processes, and that could vary anything from fulfillment, ordering, to painting, to welding. Each of those areas will have its own process that you can do that, and often people then have software to bring all of that together as well. At the other end of the system, once you've made stuff and you've ordered stuff and stuff like that, you probably have to get your money in. And so having some sort of cash collection process is vital, arguably more vital than ever right now, because without that, if you haven't got money coming into your business and you've got the customers holding on to it right now because they choose to, then it's very difficult to keep cash in your business. So again, documenting that, having a way in terms of making sure that you get your invoices out on time. If, like quite a few of my clients are in the service business doing time-related work, rather than sending out the invoice at the end of the month, send out the invoice at the end of each week when that work is done. That's going to improve the cash collection cycle. You can test and measure it and see how these things work out as well. So, Ben, there's a whole raft of different processes that everybody has ostensibly that you can get to work on. Are there any others that you deem are really important from your business perspective?
No, I think you've pretty much got a lot of them covered there, and there's some great ideas there, and I'm sure you've got people's cogs turning already. One of the other benefits that people don't necessarily realize with having these systems and processes on paper, apart from having a much more slicker and consistent business and the way it operates in all those areas that you've talked about, I think a lot of businesses, particularly smaller businesses, struggle with training and development when they're bringing on new members onto the team, when they do find that great team member. But if you have these systems and processes documented for each of the functions of the business, regardless of where that new person is joining the team, well, there's your training and development. You've got them mapped out, give them the folder or the spreadsheet and let them go off and try it for themselves. And so it kills a lot of birds with one stone, which you might not necessarily think happens to begin with. It's not just a paper exercise of this is seen as good business practice. There are many almost tangible benefits to the business to doing it and doing it well.
Huge. And again, if you then start thinking about this is your business operation system or ops manual or whatever is going to drive your business forward. And just again, to touch on the people piece, I've maybe just touched on recruitment, but there are a whole heap of processes just within the people area of any business. So you touch again on onboarding or making sure that, when people join you, you've got a great induction process. So they are thoroughly immersed into the culture and the way that the company is going to work, and they feel like they're really welcomed, right through to one-to-ones, and making sure that they are developed in the right way, their training plans and their personal development plans. Sometimes, unfortunately, you're going to have maybe a disciplinary, but you only need a process for having a disciplinary in your business and all those things too. I guess right now, at the other end, unfortunately, sometimes we have to let people go, and there's a process for that, and doing it in the right way. So again, capturing all these processes, and the first thing you do is start to go, and there's many different areas that you can look onto just by going into Google and finding out what process or systems I need to have in a business. You can have a checklist around those, but I think we've given a few today around that. So that's gets us up to speed with the different systems and processes. The next thing we need to think about, okay, that's all very well and good, but how on earth do I go about doing this?
Well, that was going to be my next question, Neale, because I can't tell you how many times I've sat down at the beginning of the day and thought, right, today is the day I'm going to document this process so it's consistent for everybody. But as with most things, when it comes to working on the business, you're dealing with emails, you're firefighting, you get to the end of the day and you've not started it. And particularly if you are out of that startup phase and your business is already rumbling along and you've got things happening, it can be quite overwhelming to think, right, I've got to start documenting processes and systems. Where on earth do I start? So what's your advice on that one, Neale?
So lots of different ways, and it depends sort of business you're in. But one of the areas to bring the team together, and again, doing that virtually is obviously where we need to be right now. But process mapping is one way of doing that. So everyone's got some 3M sort of post-its and stuff like that, and then starts to get to work into the right beginning of the consumer journey or wherever it is. Let's kind of map out what would that first touch point be, and then go through with post-its what are the different parts of that particular journey, and everyone has their sort of full pennant worth. And once you've got all these ideas down, then you can start to process map out where they all go in an ideal way to make sure that it's a slick from a consumer perspective, where it works efficiently from a production process. So that's certainly one way of what we call process mapping. To the other way is almost sort of making it real. So let's say, for example, you're in a pub and you want to go and make it real about how you're going to go and prepare a steak and all the accompaniments. Well, you can then say, right, this is exactly how we cook this steak in this particular pub, and this is where you go to find this, and this is where you go to find that. This is how we cook potatoes, this is how we do, and this is that. Then a photograph of how it should be laid out before it then goes to the service team. Or if you're making up a gin and tonic, and again, this is the different areas of where it needs to go. This is how you make sure you've got a clean glass. This is how the ice goes in, 4 cubes of ice, if that's your preference, asking the customer what they're like. You can go through all these different elements in terms of the ideal that you want to have that systemized. And it's no surprise that one of the biggest companies on the planet, i.e. McDonald's, everything that they do in McDonald's is systemized, isn't it? It has to, it has to be, because they want to make sure that it's not just in a pub that you get consistency, but every single McDonald's around the world, you get the fries come out the same way, the burgers come out the same way, the shakes come out the same way. Everything is systemized, and they'll have checklists, but they'll use photographs to do that as part of the training. But that's why McDonald's can be run by a 22-year-old, as a general manager, because it's all systemized, and you just need to make sure that people follow the system. So there's a number of ways. The other way I think you may have alluded to is having a checklist. So let's just go through a checklist in terms of what has got to happen if we're going through a recruitment process. What are the things that you've got to happen? And this is one of the reasons why flights stay safe. Every single pilot, every single captain of a flight, even though they've just taken off and landed, will go through that same checklist again, because they're in the business of keeping people safe, getting from A to B. But everything will be systemized around checklists, so do that every single time. It's part of the discipline they'll have. Same with it's interesting, the checklist manifesto.
I was just about to mention that myself. For anybody that's interested, we'll be in the show notes.
Good, yeah. So tell me about why is the checklist manifesto a great book to reference?
Well, for me, when I first heard a book that is written around the subject of a checklist, I thought, how much could you actually write about a checklist? But when you look at the examples, and the difference it makes, particularly like you say with the pilots and surgeons as well. The amount of mistakes that are reduced with experienced, seasoned surgeons when they are having a checklist, even with the most basic stuff, they have to do these things. It made a phenomenal difference to the results. And again, it just has that consistency. It means that waste is reduced. It means that inefficiencies are reduced, and best practice is promoted regardless of who's doing it.
Exactly that. I know it's wonderful to see that those examples. I can't remember exactly the statistic, but those surgeons, those hospitals that in the operating ward follow that checklist have survival rates so many times more than those that didn't. So
yeah, it was all to do with the infection rates, wasn't it? So because they had the checklist, which included washing the hands and putting on the gloves, which some surgeons weren't doing, there was a certain infection that just absolutely went down because everybody now was following this checklist. But it's I haven't read it's been a couple of years now, but it's definitely for anybody that wants to understand how to put a good checklist together that they can roll out to the rest of the business.
Yeah,
have it effective. It's a great read.
It definitely is. And then so we've talked a bit about process mapping, we talked about videos, so bring that live, we talked about checklists, or just how to document, and again, sometimes once you recognize that there is a process that needs fixing, is then it's just getting to work on it and just making the first steps. Even though, as you're right, you say it's not going to be ideal to start with, you can continue to make iterations. So that then brings me on to the next area that we look at with our clients anyway, and we bring to them what we call a process accountability chart. Process accountability chart. Okay. So when we do this, we kind of have a conversation with them to, again, help them brainstorm what are the key processes that underline their business. And they'll start to get to work on what the key processes what underline their business. And it may come out with recruitment or sales or customer service or whatever it is. So we'll write all those down. And then the next thing we do is we then attribute an owner to that particular process. And this is the big difference here, is that we see that most processes don't have an owner. And if they haven't got an owner and haven't got a sort of an indicator that process has been improved, makes things cheaper or it makes things faster or it makes things better, then they get ignored. They just kind of, just no one's looking at it. But if you've got somebody who's owning that process, and they've got their KPI around it, and then they're going to be judged against it in their performance, well, then they really get to focus on it. And if it certainly goes across different departments, like a sales process would, or like a recruitment process would, then you don't necessarily need the owner of the sales director to own that, that particular process. You could have anybody bet that somebody who's process minded to actually own it and to keep improving that. So that's called the process accountability chart. And it's a great way then of reflecting, and what we'll particularly have 6 or 7 processes that we will capture on there. And the next we do then, once we've captured that, is to say, okay, if we could just fix one process in the next 90 days, just one of those processes, what would it be? And let's say we say right now, this is probably very pertinent. We need to fix the cash collection process. We need to have that really working effectively and get money. Great. Okay. So who's the best person to own the cash collection process? Oh, well, Bob is the best person because it works on. Okay, right. So then Bob gets to work on that, and then maybe put a team of people together just to start documenting how it works through currently, when they get sent out, what kind of paper is it on, what are the sort of things they do, speak to their customers, is it easy to pay us, find out all those areas around that, then start documenting and then capture that, and then it's Bob's responsibility to improve that, make that better. So I think that's a really good way of bringing ownership to a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody out there who is like me, who is a control freak and finds it hard to delegate, as you've alluded to there, you don't have to come up with these process and systems for yourself. Like you say, the people who are out on the front lines have a far better idea of things, how they work, what doesn't work, what does work. Dish it out to those guys, give them some incentives, give them some rewards, and get the team involved. And like you say, they feel like they're part of growing the business and they feel valued and appreciated for it. So absolutely. My question on this, Neale, and I presume it's one you must get asked quite often, is once you have these systems and processes in place, how rigid do people have to stick to these systems and processes? Does it depend on the business that you're in? Will you have businesses where it's almost a disciplinary event if they bring in their own sort of interpretation or don't stick exactly to it? Like a McDonald's, for example, you wouldn't be able to cook a chicken at a slightly different temperature, or put the burger in a different oven. I don't know, I've never worked there, but I actually wish I had, to see how it works.
Yeah.
Or is it best to have some flexibility to let people bring in their own personalities and their own ideas, and use them more as guidelines rather than you must?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because, as you rightly say, it's going to be horses for courses. Clearly in McDonald's, and you've got have a gazillion McDonald's around the world, then it's critical that you have a similar sort of experience everywhere. You could go experimenting, with the fries in one place, that wouldn't work. But I think some of the areas that you have to keep that sort of discipline going through. Number is sales, is for one. So if you've got a big sales team, you can't have everybody sort of being creative around that, because then before you know it, you've got 200 different iterations of the way that you do sales, and that certainly can't work. But maybe if you've got a digital marketing agency, or you've got creative, or you've got other areas where you're able, and a bit like 2 Second Lean, they're always innovating to improve their processes. But I think the innovation comes through to improve the existing process. That's the key thing. And then once that's made, then you could follow the next system around that. So I think you will need to be careful. My guidance would always be, when you first got a new system or process come in, is to live with that for a while, and then just challenge it as to how you can make it better, smarter, more cost effective.
How do businesses, particularly the businesses that implement the new systems and processes that use a top-down approach, how do they get buy-in from the rest of the team? Have you seen any good ways that they've been able to roll new systems out, and rather than having the team think, oh God, we've got to change the way we're doing things again and again? How do they switch that mindset to, yeah, this is an improvement, let's run with it?
Yeah, great thing. I think, again, going back to the 2 Second Lean, and what Paul Akers has done so well is recognizing that having a lean culture is one thing, but with culture comes this whole education that this is a great thing to do, that by making your jobs easier, by taking away all the mistakes, taking away all the lack of consistency, that's just going to make you look smarter, and it's going to give our customers a better experience, and ultimately, if we can pay you more money, because at the end of the day, money that we were having to cough up, and the loss of gross margin by making mistakes the whole time, means that you be royally incentivized to get a hold of this. So I think that the communication is key, that you're working for a professional company that's got really good systems, that you're not having to spend all your time firefighting, because literally without systems, you're just sorting out chaos and problems the whole time. So if you're able to sell in the benefit of, by doing this, that's going to make you look smarter, it's going to reduce friction amongst your employees, it's going to delight your customers more. So I think when you think about the benefits, and that's both to an organization, but sending a benefit to your employees, the fact that it's going to reduce errors, it's going to reduce waste, it's going to save them time, it's going to improve the customer satisfaction, it's going to lead to more improved gross profit through better training and better ongoing improvement. It's going to improve their morale. Lots of benefits that come through this for them, for customers, for the business as a whole. And I think right now, when we've got this time when we have maybe no longer the excuse that we didn't have time to look at our systems, well, we've got plenty of time now. And we've got a lot of our colleagues that are working at home, that maybe we can get them to work on, these systems. So I think what I'd be saying coming out of this podcast, Ben, is, right, what can you get to work on in the next week? Definitely have a think about that process accountability chart, and we'll have the template for you to do at the bottom of the podcast. Think about the 5 or 6 critical processes that you need, or systems you need, to run your business effectively. Allocate an owner, get to work over the next 3 or 4 weeks on him, what those systems look like, and maybe even choose one that to start with. We see that if you do this over the course of one process you fix every quarter, well, over the process of 2 years, that's 8 core processes you've actually nailed down. 8 core processes you nailed down, you're kind of going to have your business singing around that. And of course, there are other huge benefits of having systems and processes. One, the organization runs better. Obviously, that's huge. But 2, every business of a sale at a price one day or other, any business that runs with great systems and process has a huge amount more valuation. to one that hasn't. And people will pay a premium if your business can run without you. They ever buy it, everything runs like clockwork, and they have to worry about that. So, this doesn't just have benefits in terms of helping you right now, but it helps massive benefits in the long run as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Neale. That is the playbook on how to create great systems and processes for your business. So if you've not got those nailed down, like Neale says, now is the time to get out there, speak with the team. You mentioned the post-it notes earlier, which I loved, particularly with mapping out the customer journey. A website that I've found particularly useful for that, which is free as well, is Trello, where you can just set up columns for your different processes and everybody can contribute and move things around. So for anybody that's not aware of that, that's Trello.com. Definitely worth checking that out if you're going to get these systems and processes nailed. So as Neale's mentioned, all of those all of those links, the 2-second lean, fast cap, the process accountability chart, that's all going to be included over at the show notes at benjaminbrain.co.uk. So make sure you head over there and check them out, all free, of course, to help you make these things better for your businesses and get back up to speed as quickly as possible. So have you got anything else you'd like to add on top of what we've already talked about, Neale? Or I think everybody's got pretty much what they need to get out there and start building some brilliant processes for their business.
Definitely. I just reinforce again what we talked about right at the beginning. Think about, systemized routine, humanized exception. Has been taught all my life around the benefits of doing that. The notion of leverage and ever more with ever less couldn't not be more pertinent right now.
Brilliant. Great thoughts to wrap up on. As always, Neale, thank you for joining me. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It's definitely given me a lot of thoughts that I'm going to take away and start working on. So thanks for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your experiences. And I'll catch up with you next week for another episode of Advertsity To Prosperity.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Neale. Catch up with you soon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.